Okay, so this is an example of why we need to cut the suckers off on avocados before that they outgrow the actual tree. This tree is actually suffering because all the nutrients are going into the sucker. The sucker's taller than the tree. And people may not know this, but all avocado trees, or at least commercial cultivators, are all grafted, which means they're either grafted onto a clonal rootstock or they're grafted onto a seedling, usually Zutano seedling rootstock. So when your avocados are growing, you need to keep eyes on them and make sure that some big branch doesn't grow up from below where they grafted the Hass avocado onto the Zutano, or the Lamb Hass onto the Zutano. And so this tree got burned in the heat last year, and we weren't sure if it was going to make a comeback. It has made a comeback, but look at this. This is the rootstock outgrowing the whole tree. So sometimes people see that and they're like, oh, my tree's doing great. It has a new central leader system, but that is not true. This is going to be a completely different kind of avocado tree. We don't even know if it will produce fruit or it will not produce fruit, and it will not be whatever this is, a Lamb Hass. It will not be a Lamb Hass avocado. So you need to take your clippers and you need to keep eyes on the early years of the fruit, and you need to cut it off, because look at this thing. Look, I'll stand up. It's as tall as I am, and it was growing from below the graft. So this is a completely different kind of avocado, and the leaves look different. Everything about it is different. And now sometimes you are questioning whether something's below the graft or not. Just cut it off, because here's the graft. These little guys, let's just cut them off. This is obviously above the graft, above the graft, above the graft, and this one's above the graft. So now we've cut off everything that is not above the graft. So now we know that this whole tree, everything here is Lamb Hass, and as it grows up, it's going to create the kind of fruit that we want. We would have been rolling the dice with this one, not knowing what kind of fruit it is. And all the fruits that you guys are familiar with from the stores, the Hass and the Reed and these different kinds of avocados, they've been developed over years and they've been patented, and they're count onable. We know what kind of fruit that they're going to be. Now I'm going to show you an example of a big tree, a 60 or 70-year-old Hass avocado tree that someone did not cut that thing that was coming off the bottom. And I'm going to show you what it looks like 50 years later. Hey, so someone didn't do that, what I just did 50, 60 years ago. So this is the rootstock growing up and displacing the Hass avocado tree. So this Hass avocado tree is still here, but it's just been displaced and pushed to grow out the side, which is what would have happened with that one where I just cut the sucker off, because the sucker was stronger than the original, the grafted tree, and so it just outgrew it. So here we have Hass avocados. You can see there's tons of avocados growing. If you look up into it, there's lots of avocados everywhere to be found. There's some down here, tons of Hass avocados for next year's crop. Yup, tons. Now look up in there. No Hass avocados. I don't even see any avocados. But interestingly enough, this year we discovered it does make avocados. Come over here and look at these weird little avocados that it's making. We don't have any idea what kind of avocados they are. We're calling them the chili pepper avocados right now. But look at those long, skinny avocados. And there's another one right here. A weird, long, skinny, shiny. Oh, here's another one right here. So even though when we look up in the canopy of the tree, we don't see any avocados, I suspect there's a lot of these little skinny things up in there. And we'll just have to see what these taste like. But we're not cutting this tree down and leaving just the Hass part, because the majority of this tree is this other seedling rootstock that's grown up over the years, and it's providing lots of shade and protection for other trees and a place for people to take a rest. And since most of the trees were ripped out of my farm when we got here, and most of our trees are pretty young, I definitely am not wanting to cut down this big tree. But in the future, we may cut that part off and graft something else to it, or just cut it off and let that Haas avocado tree have all of the roots to be supporting it. But I think that even if you cut it off, the root stock is much stronger than the Haas. Because if you look right here, it's still shooting suckers 50 years later. You see that? That's still shooting a sucker here. It seems like there's been huge suckers that have grown out of here, that out of the rootstock here and here as well. So I suspect that even if we cut this off, it would keep throwing suckers. And it's such a beautiful shade tree. And eventually we're going to put a pond in over here, and this will be a nice little place to sit by the pond and watch the pond and sit in the shade. So we're not going to cut it down, but this is an awesome example of why you definitely want to have the sucker cut off, and so that it doesn't overtake. Because wouldn't it be better if this whole huge 60-year-old tree was producing Haas avocados everywhere? Mr. King, what happened? Ernie, how come you guys didn't cut the sucker off? Why is this tree half Haas and half rootstock? Ernie King used to own this ranch, and he still lives on the ranch, but he cut out one little piece of his property and he sold the rest of the ranch. So he lives in the middle of our ranch, and we love him and his wife Patty very much. So I'll have to harass him and ask him why we didn't keep up on cutting the rootstock down for this tree. Thanks for learning about avocados and why it's important to cut the suckers off of them. And if this video was interesting to you, please subscribe, like, share, and comment below.